Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a good Saturday. I just wanted to hop on and talk to you about something real quick. Yesterday, the transcripts were released in the Bryan Kohberger trial. He's not quite made it to trial yet. This was a sealed hearing that took place last month, and Ann Taylor, his attorney, was arguing some different things around his case. And I just found some parts of the conversation really interesting. Some parts I think were really boring. The part that I found was really interesting may not be interesting to everyone, but I had a mixed emotions during this part. There was a portion of the hearing that was pretty lengthy that was around the IGG DNA. Specifically, they talked quite a bit about GSK, the Golden State Killer, which I like a good Golden State Killer conversation. I find him to be one of the creepiest. And I remember back in 2018 when his case broke in his kind of the world learned his name for the first time, and everyone found out that this, guy who had terrorized California for at least a decade, it may have been longer, he had went scot-free, totally eluded law enforcement for 40 years. And all of a sudden in 2018, we find out this old grandpa looking man had committed some of the most horrific crimes in California. He had so many victims. He had 12 murders under his belt. He had 45 violent SAs and over 100 burglaries. He was a super creep. He he escalated over the years. So he started off kind of stalking and breaking in to people's homes, and then it was young girls, and then he escalated up to the point to where he was intentionally breaking into households that had a husband and wife, and he would tie up the husband, put dishes on his back, and assault the wife while threatening to kill the husband if he moved or tried to help her. It was just this super strange domination and control thing that he had going on for a long time. Then everyone finds out he was a retired police officer, and that just threw everyone for a loop. And everyone was so curious about this DNA they used. Now, correct me if I'm not remembering my details on the GSK, because it was in 2018. And so I might have forgotten some details, but if I remember correctly, he had a cousin who uploaded their DNA into a genealogy database, similar to 23andMe Ancestry type database. And law enforcement got a hit on that in 2018. And so they built out this family tree that led them to James D'Angelo, who had thrown, his name's Joseph James D'Angelo. So his first name's Joseph. So he had thrown away, I think it was a root beer at a Hobby Lobby. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was a root beer at Hobby Lobby. And police swooped in, double-checked that DNA, and knew they had their man. So what I found interesting in the Kohberger sealed hearing is they just discussed GSK at length, and they went into just chit-chatting about 23andMe, Ancestry, some website called Heritage. I'm not familiar with these DNA websites personally. I'm not into the genealogy, but apparently this whole GSK thing sparked quite a controversy. There were kind of hobbyist genealogists, there were professional genealogists, there were all these people that were totally freaked out that law enforcement did this, that they used those databases to grab GSK. But I think the general public, it was hailed as this great scientific breakthrough, this great new tool for criminal investigations to solve these cold cases, whether it be victims, families, family members of law enforcement, community members. It seemed like everyone was kind of talking about different cold cases in their area and hoping that this technology could help bring justice to those victims. And so where it kind of crossed paths in this hearing was Ann Taylor, Bryan Kohberger's defense attorney, was arguing that the not private investigator, it would have been a detective, that the detective in his case did not disclose to the judge when they got the probable cause affidavit. They did not disclose that they were using this database, and that's where the tip about Kohberger came from. And so Ann Taylor, she's just turning this into a legal minefield, really. Golden State Killer case, it was a heroic breakthrough. Kohberger's case, legal minefield. That's what it seems like anyway, because the defense is arguing that withholding the fact that that DNA evidence was found through IGG, that it could invalidate the probable cause affidavit altogether. So the question that I was pondering wasn't whether IGG was effective. It was whether using it without full disclosure, does that violate a suspect's rights? At what point does that groundbreaking science break into potential misconduct? Now, I want to be clear. I don't think this is technology that your average detective is using every day. It sounds like this was really real-time Hail Mary from some detectives that, had this knife sheath. But other than that, really didn't have a lot of suspects. They did get into some discussion that really this IGG changed the entire trajectory of the investigation, that prior to this tip, they were looking for a different model of car. So I think they were still looking for the Hyundai Elantra, but I think they were narrowed in on a different model, so an older style. And really, once they got this tip, they kind of expanded things. So it looked to me like Ann Taylor was kind of laying the groundwork that they didn't have a case against Bryan, and then they built one and made it fit. I'm not faulting her for that. She's a defense attorney. That's her job. Her job is to protect her client's rights. Her job is to get anything that she thinks might be very potentially damaging for the jury out of there before they ever hear it. So I think I was just I had mixed feelings during that part of the transcript. Part of me thought, oh, this is so interesting. I love to talk about GSK a little bit. I don't claim to be like the fact finder of the case, but I've always found that case interesting. But then it also got to a point of like, come on with it. You guys have been chit-chatting about these different website databases and their privacy policies. And for such a long period of time, they shared that some of them you can consent as if you're uploading your DNA, you can consent at that time that law enforcement can use it. I just found it really interesting that they were bringing those two cases together, and they talked so much about GSK. I know this conversation won't be the same conversation they have in front of the jury, because the judge will need to rule on whether or not it can come in and whether or not it was unconstitutional. And so I think it's kind of interesting because I'm trying to catch up in comment sections, but I just know that it was two very different reactions to the same technology. When it was Joseph James D'Angelo, it was hailed as a huge victory, a huge justice for victims. And then in Kohberger, it's really being viewed more as a violation of his constitutional rights. So I'm kind of interested to hear from others. What do you think? Should law enforcement have access to public genealogy databases? Do you think that the concerns about privacy are valid, or do you feel that catching a killer outweigh any fears that someone may have? Let me know in the comments. Send me your thoughts. Drop a comment. I really, really want to know what you think makes it different. I mean, I understand that Ann Taylor's arguing that it should have been disclosed in that probable cause affidavit, but I'm just really fascinated to know what makes people feel so strongly about the difference in these two. I know that at this point, GSK has been convicted. Bryan Kohberger has not even went to trial yet, so it's still alleged. He's still a suspect. He is not confirmed to be the super creepy guy that went in the night and murdered 4 college students. That still has to be determined to a jury. We know for sure that GSK was convicted, and I think he's currently on death row. I haven't checked in on his case in a while, but I'm just curious. Did anyone else find that portion of the conversation that they had in the sealed hearing interesting? Let me know.